This is 5 minutes of political common sense for America. I'm Brian Boeheim, the political engineer. And in this segment, I want to talk about the failure of collective bargaining. There has been so much anger and frustration pointed at the governors of Wisconsin, Ohio, and Indiana. But do liberal Democrats really understand the issue any better? The conservative media sure has painted the protesters and unions as stupid and greedy. In my opinion, both sides lack a clear distinction. It is not whether collective bargaining should be allowed, but the real issue is to what degree collective bargaining makes sense. Let's look at history. There is no question that the unionization of certain industries helped end things like child labor and sweatshops. It provided the average unskilled worker the ability to maintain some semblance of economic consistency and provided for safety regulations that saved many, many lives. On the other hand, there has been a transition over the last 30 years. From the well-meaning intention of unions providing collective bargaining to a selfish, greedy, manipulating monopoly of labor by the power-mongering union leaders. So let's look at collective bargaining. There's no argument that a group of people who all do the same job, have the same relative skill set, and work in the same geography should have the ability to pool their forces to argue for better wages and better working conditions. It provides a balance of power that prevents management from taking advantage of workers. On the other hand, when you start congregating working groups that don't do the same job, have the same skill set, or work in differing geographies, then you have a problem. You literally create a union monopoly of labor, which creates an unfair negotiating position. It's a contradiction to the original purpose of fair and equal bargaining. Let me give you some examples. If all the carpenters in Chicago were to unionize in order to provide a collective bargaining position, then it makes sense. What if the same workers then joined forces with all the plumbers, electricians, and masons as well? Now you have a problem, because they could literally shut down all construction in the city of Chicago. That's an unfair bargaining position. What if teachers joined forces with waste disposal workers? That once again would be unfair, because the joined unions, the conspiratorial relationship between them, would put a stranglehold on two very disparate parts of our everyday life, which we can't do without. This, again, would be an unfair bargaining position. My last example is that what works in Chicago doesn't translate when applied to Harrisburg, Illinois, for example. How could it possibly be fair to have wage or treatment negotiated at the state level be then applied to both a worker in Chicago and in Harrisburg? Harrisburg has half the average income, and the cost of living is far below most of Illinois. It just doesn't make sense. Let me wrap it up with this. Should collective bargaining be allowed? Of course. Should it be allowed to run companies, cities, and states into the ground because it created a monopoly of labor? Absolutely not. You don't have to look any further than cities like Buffalo, Rochester, Cleveland, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and even Chicago to see how it can damage the entire economy of once great cities. We have to realize that this is not just a black and white issue, a right or wrong, a left or right. This is an issue of degrees. You've been listening to 5 minutes of political common sense for America. I'm Brian Boeheim, the political engineer. If you like what you've heard here, go out and pick up a copy of my book, Political Common Sense for America. You can find it at Amazon.com. Until next time, be safe out there.